Tove winced as he peeked in through one of the windows on the topmost floor of the Imperial Palace. His throat squeezed so tightly, so swallowing and breathing felt quite uncomfortable. The window ledge had been wide enough that he was able to stand on it, and so he dismissed his energy wings. Tove beheld a wide corridor, which was empty for the moment. Based on the intel from this spy, Chutar guards passed by this given point every 3 to 5 minutes. That didn't leave a lot of time to sneak through the hallways. His heart thundered in his chest. This mission wasn't as straightforward or easy to accomplish as his last one. For one, he didn't have support. For two, he wasn't allowed to kill any of the humans. And lastly, he had to remain undetected. Tove bit the insides of his lip, and he pressed his back against the unyielding structure of the window frame. The window he crouched in was a part of a little alcove that extended off of the main square root of the topmost floor. Beautiful doors lined the hallway, although the door he needed was on the far side of the palace, where none of the other windows were opened. Utter silence lingered in the hallways, but still Tove waited and watched. Any minute, a pair of Chutar would come around the corner, and then walk the length of the corridor before turning around the next corner. Tove reached around his neck and began playing with the dark golden gem that hung around his neck. That had been a gift from the elders, and it served a singular purpose. A dark chuckle bubbled up from Tove's throat, but he suppressed it within his mouth. This place was far more perilous than an Oni-filled battlefield, and the consequences for losing would be so much more dire if he failed. A man and a woman stepped around the corner, and they halted where they stood. The Chutar armor was composed from orchid purple-colored scales held together by lime-green rawhide cords. They both carried spears, but they also had swords in sheaths at their sides as well. Neither the man or the woman said anything, and they simply gazed around the hallway. Tove inched out of sight, but then peeked back around the corner once he heard their footsteps. They walked down the hall with a grim seriousness. Tove swallowed and then braced himself to move at the right moment. When the Chutar disappeared behind the corner, Tove gently hopped into place. It had finally begun, and he couldn't turn back now. Tove swiftly moved to the far corner where the Chutar had moved beyond. The entire floor was quiet, which made Tove's skin crawl. What purpose did these rooms serve, or were they simply stocked and left unused in case someone needed them? Far to the north, his people lived in simple squalor compared to the unquestionable decadence the human royalty enjoyed. Even in the city of Xianba, there existed humans who barely scraped lives together. And yet the Empress lived in this much luxury? In the Vren society, no one lived more lavishly than anyone else, including their elders. Tove placed his back to the wall, and he peeked around the corner. Sweat dripped down his face. The hallway around the corner appeared to descend into a downward staircase. He waited and kept a tight rein on his breath. If he let it go, he was liable to drive himself mad due to the thick tension. The sound of footfalls against stone stairs found their way into Tove's perception. He pushed harder against the stone as if trying to melt with it. If the Chutar followed the pattern of their previous routes, then they would turn right at the top of the stairs. If they turned toward him, though, what could he do? A different pair of Chutar, a pair of men, moved to the top of the stairs. One of them asked aloud,
"Left or right?"
Tove's heart thudded harder, and his leg muscles started to quiver. The urge to move back down the hallway nearly dominated him, and yet he remained still. Right or left? Right or left? The Chutar moved toward the right, and then they disappeared behind the far corner. Tove moved up to the top of the stairs, but he hid around the corner just in case. Paintings covered the walls of the stairwell, and it dipped at a 45-degree angle. Another corridor was at the bottom of the stairs, going right and left. He summoned his wings and then glided down to the bottom of the stairs with exceptional speed. As soon as he was at the bottom of the stairs, though, he dismissed them. Now where was he supposed to go? Tove moved to the left corridor and came to another corner. He peeked around. A pair of Chutar approached where he crouched from the other end of the hallway. At the moment, both of the Chutar were staring ahead, but one of the guards started to shift his attention toward Tove. Before he did, Tove moved back around and then placed himself against the corner leading back up to the stairs. Dread choked him. The pair of Chutar had started to come down the stairs. Damn it. They moved quicker than the ones Tove had first observed. Frantically, he looked between the two corridors, and he heard the sounds of the footsteps getting closer. He summoned his wings and an energy sword, and then he flew up to the ceiling. Tove stabbed the blade in the top of the ceiling, dismissed his wings, and then angled his body so that it was level with the ceiling. The blade's light became obscured behind Tove's body. Within seconds, his core muscles already started to protest, and they quivered wildly. Pain started to register on his senses, but he just kept his muscles tight. The four Chutar entered the hallway at the same time. They smiled at one another, and one of them mentioned that he thought he saw something. He was playfully mocked by his comrades, and then they dispersed. They went in opposite directions that mirrored one another, and soon they were both gone from Tove's sight. He lingered for only an additional 5 seconds before summoning his wings and gliding back down to the ground. His stomach, back, and thigh muscles roared with discontent, but he pushed it away for now. Tove ran to the corner in time to see the Chutar pair disappear behind the far corner. His breath came a little more ragged, but Tove still moved as swiftly as he could. At the end of the corner, Tove saw another long hallway that extended off of the square loop. Tove moved up to the far corner, and then he peeked around it. His destination was close, and all he had to do was be a little more careful for a little longer. A wild panic flared up in him, and he summoned his wings again. He flapped hard and then landed at the far end of the hallway. Just as before, he dismissed his wings and then moved to the corner. A mixture of sweet pleasure and constant throbbing echoed inside him. The pair of Chutar rounded the corner on the far side. The room he needed to get to was around that corner. Tove took in a deep breath and then stepped around the corner. As soon as he did, his wings came out briefly, and he landed beside the other corner. While it might have made more sense to just keep his wings out, the light they created was far too noticeable. Tove peered around the corner. As soon as the Chutar were out of sight, Tove ran to the fourth door in the hallway. He pushed it open, slid in, and then closed it behind him.
There you are. I was starting to get worried that you might have been caught.
The afternoon heat ran through the streets of Jedi like a soothing stream, and it touched every single person who was out and about. Nori sat in the shade of a building across from the Cake Haven, a favorite of Flara and her companions, and he lazily played soft melodies. No one had stopped to listen for at least an hour, but passerbys dropped coins into his open loot case. It had been nearly a month since Nori had come to Jedi, and by this point, the people of the city had become more accustomed to his large presence. He still gained weird looks from citizens, but for the most part, people usually left him alone. Nori had repeat patrons, which was quite nice, and a few of the patrons he had were guards. Things had been slightly different after he, Flara, Rayko, and Apisa returned from the Buka Harvest Festival. The trio of mage students still avoided getting too close to Nori, with the exception of Apisa coming to give him information on where they were going. Flara didn't really wince when they crossed paths anymore, and even Rayko's disapproval had become slightly less scowly. It was, well, kind of comforting to see even the smallest of changes. Before he had come to Jedi, Nori imagined a very different sort of experience. He pictured himself having to sit through boring lectures about academic and arcane topics he was unfamiliar with, or perhaps attend parties as Flara's shadow. These were the kind of situations his trainers had prepared him for. What Nori actually experienced was completely different. Most days, Nori played his music around town, and earned extra gold on top of the monthly stipend he was given for being on an extended mission. When he wasn't playing music, he was simply observing the general area around, wherever Flara and her friends had moved off to. Jedi was far from the political intrigue of the capital, and no one outside of Flara's friend group or the headmaster knew of her origins. In all honesty, these days and nights were peaceful. Still, Nori always seemed to turn his mind to the northeast. An older woman ran down the street, desperation covering her face like a mask. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and yet she sprinted down the road with urgency. People on the street made way for her, and some even called out for her. Dr. Kausisti was her name, as per what multiple people called her. Nori stopped playing, and he watched with grim fascination. Dr. Kausisti was an older woman dressed in practical garments, and she had her long, dark brown hair wrapped in a sort of bun at the base of her skull. Strands of gray ran the length of her hair. She stopped just before Nori, and she gazed at the cake haven.
By Sido's grace, please let them be here. Please.
She opened the front door and then stormed inside. Nori collected the coins from his case, placed the loot inside it, and then secured it. He grabbed both the case and his Tetsubo, and then moved into the cake haven. Up till this point, he hadn't ventured into the tea house or bakery. His gut throbbed with fury, though, and so he followed his instincts. Natural daylight poured in through the windows, and a half-dozen wooden tables sat positioned in various places. Nori stepped inside and saw most of the patrons looking to where Dr. Kausisti had sat, which was right beside Flara, Apisa, and Rayko. Rayko was right beside her, and she gently caressed Dr. Kausisti's back. Apisa and Flara sat across from her, and they listened to whatever the doctor was saying. Nori lingered toward the back of the tea house, but he listened just like the other patrons did.
Please, Doctor, you have to calm down, okay? Who has your husband?
The Karama clan. They stormed into our home and dragged him away. Not even an hour ago. What am I gonna do?
What were you thinking getting involved with that lot? If my memory serves me correctly, you were the one who warned us to avoid them at all costs.
It wasn't our fault. We didn't know who we were doing business with until it was too late. They just came in and got medicine from us. What am I gonna do? They're gonna kill my husband.
Have you told the city guard yet? Maybe they can do something.
They said they couldn't help me. They said since we did business with them, even unknowingly, that we were liable for the consequences of their wrath.
How absolutely dreadful. It seems that even the city guard is frightened of the Karaba clan.
Flara reached forward and grabbed Dr. Kausisti's hands in her own. It was strange, but a sparkling twinkle ignited in her eyes. Yes, there was still the same level of timid softness, and yet Nori noted the spark.
I know you're scared, but I want you to know that we're going to help you.
You are? But I didn't expect you to do anything. I just didn't know where else to go. What can you do?
We have magic, so we should be able to get in there and get your husband out with no trouble.
That is right, darling. Do not forget that I am the best illusionist in all of Jedi. Flara has command and sway over the Kami, and Apisa can transform herself in multiple different ways.
Nori broke through the crowd of the other patrons and set his loot case on the table between them. Everyone in the tea house gazed up at Nori, for they had all been transfixed by the conversation at the table.
You'll also have me. I don't have magic, but I make up for it in muscle and fortitude. I volunteer to go on this endeavor. Strangers who I have never met before.
Were you listening in on our conversation? How terribly rude of you! Were you not raised with manners and common decency?
Hey, I say the more the merrier. After the troll thing down in Buka, I'd welcome his help.
I suppose it can't be helped. If you want to help us, Mr. Musician, you are welcome to.
Dr. Calcisti studied Nori for a moment, and then she turned her attention to Rayko.
Troll thing? Wait. You're that Oni stan who plays the lute in the square sometimes. Are you really capable of helping with this?
Trust me, he'll be helpful. There isn't enough time to tell you the story, though. Do you know where they took your husband?
Yes. They took him to one of their warehouses on the east side of Jedi. It may already be too late.
Don't think that way, Doctor. We're going to go right now, and we'll be back soon, okay?
Dr. Calcisti told them which warehouse her husband was taken to. Nori asked the doctor to hold on to his loot case while he ventured off with the girls, and they left the tea house. Nori followed behind them, but said nothing until they were far away enough from anyone else.
The headmaster mentioned you were reckless, and now I can see it for myself. Huh. Any other of my order would have stopped you.
What do you expect us to do? Sit by and do nothing while our friend's husband dies?
I didn't say that. I'm just...
How are you going to talk to us about being reckless when you throw yourselves at 2 trolls all by yourself?
It's different with me. I'm trained to handle situations like that.
Actually, you are trained to stay by your master's side, or relatively close to it. You violated that directive when you decided to go forth and save those children. By no means are we condemning you for it, but we will not have you use double standards with us either.
Besides, if you tell on us, we're going to tell on you back. So there.
Quite right.
Flara stopped in the street and she let her eyes fall a little downcast. Nori, Rayko, and Apisa stopped behind her.
Flara, are you alright, darling?
Flara turned around and looked into Nori's eyes. Her irises wavered, and yet the little princess didn't break eye contact.
I, understand that this must be taxing on you, Mr. Nori. I never wanted to make anyone frustrated or inconvenienced. I just wanted to be a normal person. A normal mage student who goes to school and learns. I realize that I am not a normal person, though. I think about that every day. One duty of an Imperial princess is to serve the people in the best possible manner. Dr. Calcisti is my friend, and she needs our help. I couldn't sit by and not do something, you know? I have magic, powerful magic and knowledge, but what? But what's the point of it all if I don't use it to help those around me?
Flara tucked some hair behind one of her ears, and she averted her eyes for a moment.
I promise that I'll be extra careful. But I have to do this. I have to help her.
I understand, Miss Flara. I'm at your service, and I'm here to protect you, and your friends. But I'm also here to fight on your behalf as well. I am more than just an annoying shield, I am a tool as well.
Flara winced, and she bit the bottom of her lips slightly. She didn't say anything for a dozen seconds or so, and during that entire time, she traced her eyes over Nori's form.
Others may see the Chutar that way, but I don't. You are more than a tool. You're a brave person who risked his life to save others. Other Chutar wouldn't do that. You're different, and I appreciate that about you. But please stand with me when I seek to also be, brave.
Yes, Miss Flara, I promise to support you without hindering you on whatever path you take.
Yes, this is quite touching and all, but a person's life is in very real danger. Let us be off.
Right.
They started moving down the street again toward the eastern side of Jedi. Apisa kept pace with Nori.
Oh, and by the way, the three of us aren't defenseless. We have magic, and you just have a big stick. As much as you're planning on protecting us, we're going to be protecting you too.
Despite the danger, I look forward to seeing what this magic of yours can do.
There you are. I was starting to get worried that you might have been caught.
I nearly was. Trying to get in here was obscenely difficult. I wonder how hard it will be to leave.
It'll be much easier than you think. If you go down the hallway to the right and follow another corridor, it leads to a stairwell leading down to a small, private outdoor garden. If you fly low and toward the mountains, you should be able to avoid detection.
The woman was seated on a queen-sized bed at the far end of the room. There weren't any windows, and only a small candle that pushed back the darkness. She wore an elegant white dress with various colors accentuating the edges of the garment. Her long black hair flowed behind her and was obviously well maintained. The woman's magenta-colored eyes sparkled with elegance and authority. She sat upon the bed with a straight back, and her hands resting in her lap. A small bag lay beside her on the bed. In addition to the bed, there was a waiting couch against the left wall. Tove walked over and hopped up on it. Compared to the spy, who was a full-grown human woman, Tove might have been mistaken for her red-headed stepchild. Tove gazed toward the bag.
Is that it?
Yes, it is. And I want to make sure you're aware of how much effort I had to go through to sneak this trinket out of the restricted section of the Royal Archives.
It is no mere trinket. It is one component of a much grander plan to free our masters. I'm actually surprised it was so easy, no offense, to obtain this one. The first piece was protected by some kind of booby-trapped guardian.
Had you not had my aid, then you would have found it even more difficult than your booby-trapped guardian, I am sure. The Chutar around the Royal Archives are more numerous and steely-eyed. I'm not trying to squabble or compare with you, though. Let us move on with the exchange. If I linger any longer, my prolonged absence will be noted.
The spy grabbed the bag and then held it out for Tove. He hopped over, took hold of it, and then took out the small triangular metal piece that was inside. Just like the first piece of the Sparkle Star lock, the metal surface glistened in the faint light. Tove ran his fingers over it, and then gestured it to the spy. In turn, she took hold of it and held it up to the light.
It is so strange that something so small would lead to the return of the Alarcorni.
By itself, it is nothing more than a pretty hunk of metal, albeit one with magical vibrations. But when combined with the other pieces, and with the dragon key, the Twilight Door shall open.
The spy handed Tove back the piece of the Sparkle Star lock, and he tucked it into his side pouch. A brief moment drifted between them before Tove took out the yellow pendant from his shirt. He took it off and then gestured it to the spy. The spy studied the pendant for a moment and then took it from him.
What is this? Such a pretty little thing.
I was told to give this to you as a reward, and that I would get a replacement as soon as I returned home with the second piece of the lock. This will enable you to hear them.
Them? They can communicate with us now? I didn't think it was possible.
It is a newer development. In truth, my people have been working for centuries for methods to reconnect to our old masters. For what it's worth, I am appreciative that you have sided with the Vren and the Masters. There was once a time when I believed all humans were terrible. Terrible, greedy monsters who betrayed the Alicorni in ages past. You have shown me that perhaps things can be as they once were. Thank you.
Yes, the Alarcorni showed me the past through my dreams. They showed me the bounties and how my ancestors robbed them of their power. I suppose in part this is my penance for their betrayal. If I can lead my people back into balance, then maybe I can save some of them.
Had you not pledged yourselves to our masters, I suspect that they would have wiped all of you out upon their return. Which reminds me, my elders told me to give you a message.
Oh?
In the very near future, you will need to ascend and assume your destiny.
For a long moment, the spy simply looked at Tove with wondering eyes, and then palpable realization blossomed in her irises.
I see. To be honest, I was expecting this order would come eventually. Do you know how long I have?
No, not exactly. It will probably have to happen before the Twilight Door opens. The Masters will no doubt contact you through the pendant. If there is nothing else, I should probably get going.
Yes. Well, be safe and fight well.
You as well. Don't get discovered. Both the Alicorni and the Vren need you.
Tove listened at the door, waited for the Chutar patrol to pass, and then he moved into the corridor.
There it is. What must be the warehouse where the criminals took your friend's husband?
Nori, Rayko, Apisa, and Flara stood in the mouth of an alley in the eastern side of Jedi. Numerous large warehouses dominated the area, but for the most part the streets were fairly empty. A few laborers brought cargo into one of the warehouses down the street, but they were quite far from earshot. The warehouse in question didn't look out of the ordinary, but there was a sign out front of the fenced perimeter surrounding the warehouse. The sign simply said, Karaba Clan, Warehouse Number 4.
What are we waiting for? Let's go in there and save him.
Let's sneak up to the open gate and then peek around. There still might be guards or lookouts stationed within. We don't want to be caught.
Nori moved across the street first and then placed his back to the wall of the fence. The girls trailed his steps, but crouched beside his knee. Apisa peeked around the corner ever so slightly, and then she pulled back.
There are 2 thugs standing in front of a door. Just standing there.
I'll take care of them.
Nori started to move, but then Rayko held her hand out in front of him. She didn't look at him, but she simply held up a finger. Nori nodded, and then Rayko drew in a deep breath. The tattoo on her arm began to shimmer with a chromatic light, blinking at various intervals and patterns. The air several feet from them warped, twisted, and then colors and forms appeared from nothing. Nori blinked, and a pair of beautiful women stood in the street. They were scantily clad, with very alluring body features. A wild heat filtered into Nori's cheeks. The pair of women turned their attention to Rayko for a moment, and the brown-haired mage gave them a slight nod. She waved her hand again, and once more her tattoo flashed brightly. A weird sort of bubble surrounded Nori and the others. It was translucent, but the air trembled with ripples. The pair of women stepped around the corner and called out to the unseen guards.
Excuse me, fellows. Would you mind helping us girls out?
We need some big, strong men to help us lift some heavy boxes. Do you think you can help us?
Moments later, the women walked back around the corner, skipping with delight. A pair of greasy-looking thugs with crude spears dressed in dirty clothes followed them. Dopey expressions covered their faces, and they stepped out into the street after the girls. Rayko tapped Nori on the shoulder and then gestured toward the thugs, who had their backs to Nori and the girls.
You may commence with your savagery now.
Nori stepped beyond the bubble's edge and then raised his tetsubo high. It came down with a brutal smack. The other thug turned to look at Nori, just as the war club crushed the bones of the man's face. Nori grabbed one of the men while Apisa grabbed the other. They placed the dead bodies on the interior of the fence. As soon as the corpses were hidden, Rayko waved her hands and the girls faded into nothingness.
Wow. Those girls weren't real? I couldn't tell a difference.
Well, of course you could not, darling. I am the best illusionist in all of Jedi. Word of caution. When we get in there, focus on taking out the thugs. Do not be distracted by what you see. Flara, Apisa, and I are about to show you why we are not merely damsels to be protected by a big, strong man.
Yes. If you've never seen magic up close before, It can be a little jarring. Will you lead the way, Mr. Nori?
Nori nodded and then moved in through the entrance of the warehouse. As soon as he did, he heard the sounds of someone grunting and crying out in pain. Bouts of laughter nearly drowned it out, but he still heard the anguish. A wildfire burned in his stomach and his blood boiled. Large stacks of wooden boxes lined either side of the walkway. Some of the stacks had only 1 or 2 boxes in them, but the shorter stacks also had large bags and sacks piled on them. The walkway led to the back of the warehouse, where a large opened area was cleared out. A dozen thugs stood in a circle while a 13th one stood in the center, along with a man who hung by his wrists from a rope. The rope stretched up around one of the beams of the ceiling, and then pulled back down and tied to a hook along the wall. The man who was hung by his wrists had been stripped naked, and bruises covered his entire body. Ugly welts and cuts covered his face. The 13th thug beside him had a wooden training sword, and he kept hitting the man over and over, sometimes in the ribs, other times along his thighs or his arms. Those in the crowd jeered him to hit the man harder. Nori stepped out into the open and he held his Tetsubo tightly.
How about you try hitting me with that sword?
All at once, all 13 thugs whirled around and gazed upon Nori and the others.
Who the hell are you? Do you have any idea who owns this warehouse? Get out or you're next!
No, you're next!
The tree tattoo on Apisa's thigh began glowing with a bright pink light. Apisa held up her hands before her as if she were showing off nifty gloves or something. Her fingers became elongated and formed into thick black claws. Nori's eyes widened. Dark green scales of some kind started spreading down her hands and forearms, but they stopped at her elbows. A vicious snarl covered the usually peppy blonde mage's face.
Ah! What the hell is happening to her? Did you see that? That isn't natural!
Nori's senses perked up when he heard Flara muttering something softly. Slowly, he glanced behind him. Flara clasped both hands together and she whispered softly. A purple and pink hue illuminated up from the back of Flara's collar, perhaps coming from her back. Her lips parted, and a hot pink mist floated out into the space before her mouth. It floated up and then evaporated. No one said anything, and they all watched in fascination. Suddenly, a brown ball of energy swirled into existence. Some of the thugs gasped. The ball swirled before Flara, and Nori started to move to swat it out of the sky.
Don't you dare! Honestly, must you crush everything you see?
Flara didn't look at Nori, but she stared up at the brown ball of energy that was now taking some kind of form. The top half of the energy ball became a humanoid entity with arms, a torso, and a head. The bottom half formed a sort of ghost-like tail.
Excuse me, can you please help my friends and I defeat these terrible gangsters? They are trying to hurt the man hanging from his wrists, and we have to stop them.
What are we waiting for? These bitches are obviously here for a fight. Get 'em!
The thugs blinked wildly, and then they drew their swords, axes, and other handheld weapons from their belts.
Come on, Nori. We're the front lines. We have to keep them away from Rayko and Flara.
Right.
As Nori stepped up to the approaching thugs, he noticed the brown energy thing dived into the ground and then disappeared. Rayko waved her hands and her tattoo shimmered. He couldn't waste time watching them, though, and so Nori focused on the matter at hand. He blocked the sword of the first thug he came to, and then pushed them away with immense strength. As the person stumbled back, Nori countered and crushed to the woman's shoulder. Multiple thugs jumped at Nori, and so he blocked, dodged, and twisted about, avoiding being hit. Just as he was about to start countering, a horrific sight caught his attention, and so he maintained his defensive tactics for a little longer. Firstly, Apisa had just torn a man's throat from his body. Dark blood covered her hands as she clutched a chunk of meat in her palm. Another thug swung an axe at her, but Apisa blocked it with her forearm.
The axe blade hit the green scales of Apisa's forearm, and then stopped. Apisa laughed and she raked her claws against the man's face, slicing open his eyes and nose. The man screamed, but Apisa jabbed the other clawed fingers into the man's throat. With ease, she spun her body around and tossed the man at his friends. Whenever the thugs struck out at Apisa, she merely blocked or parried their weapons away from her natural armor, and then she killed them. Terror dripped from the eyes of those who surrounded her. A massive wolf with fluffy fur and bows in its ears stood between where Nori and Apisa fought. The animal had to have been the size of a horse, and it barked loudly when thugs got too close. They tried to cut it, but the wolf dipped and dodged just as skillfully as Nori or Apisa. It snapped at the attackers, but it never connected. Nori knocked one of the spear tips from one of his attackers away, and then countered by crushing their head like a ripe melon. As he twirled to face the others, he saw Rayko, who simply stood beside Flara, a confident smirk on her face. She watched the dog with warmth in her eyes. A massive stone pillar burst from the ground, with such loud crackling thunder. Everyone except Apisa stopped. The blonde dug into a female thug's stomach and pulled out a mass of grossness. Nori watched in wonder, as did the other thugs not fighting Apisa. The stone pillar proved to be so much more, as it wiggled a set of 5 rocky fingers. The stone arm planted itself on the ground, and then the rest of the creature pulled itself free from the earth. A 10-foot, perhaps 4-ton creature made of stone and dirt stood in the warehouse, right beside Rayko's pretty dog. It punched out and sent one of the thugs into a stack of boxes. Nori pushed one of the thugs back and then slammed his Tetsubo into their kneecap. That person fell, but before Nori could kill him, his 2 friends leapt in to engage Nori. He only shifted back a couple of steps, but then he brought his Tetsubo back around. It struck one of the men in the side of the ribs, and he crumpled over. Nori twisted to the left and barely missed getting sliced open by a second thug. The thug kept swinging at Nori over and over, but the Onistan kept blocking or knocking the blade back. After the 5th or 6th sword swipe, Nori spun around, and then struck him in the middle of the back. The thug fell, but tried to get back up. Nori squashed his head. The dog stayed by Rayko and Flara, who merely watched as Apisa, the stone monster, and Nori finished off with what remained of the thugs. One of the thugs toward the back of the group ran to the back of the warehouse, and then disappeared behind a corner of boxes. Apisa ran after him. Nori smashed the last of the thugs, but then turned to gaze upon the massive rock monster, who also looked down at him. The stone monster raised his arm high.
No, wait! Mr. Nori is one of the people fighting with us. He's okay. I think we'll be okay now.
The stone monster nodded and then sank back into the ground where it stood.
Was that a commie?
Yeah, yes, that it was. It was an earth commie, to be exact. That's my speciality.
Apisa returned a few moments later, a sour frown on her face.
That guy got away. There was a back entrance and I didn't see where he went.
That is not important right now. Cut him down, please.
Nori untied the rope and gently lowered the man to the ground. Rayko took out some first aid supplies from her little side pouch, and then she began examining him.
Thanks, Saito, he is still alive, but he is hurt very badly. The poor dear must have passed out from the pain during all the confusion. I do not think his life is in any danger, but we really should get him back to Dr. Kausisti so she can ensure he does not die from internal bleeding or anything unseen.
If Apisa carries my Tetsubo, I'll be able to carry the man to wherever we need to go.
For a moment, the girls looked at one another, but they didn't say anything. Flara nodded, and then Apisa went to take the Tetsubo from Nori. At first, she nearly dropped it.
Wow, this is really heavy. I can handle it, though.
Nori bent down and took the man in his arms.
No, you have to support his head better. Put his head in the crook of your arm like this. There we go. That should be fine.
Be careful with him, Mr. Nori. He's a very dear man.
Nori followed the girls out of the warehouse. The sun had started to set, and the sky became bathed in splendid oranges. Nori let his thumb dance across his lute strings, and he filled the air with soft notes. Apisa and Flara didn't seem to mind. They all sat in Dr. Kausisti's living room, waiting to see if they had made it to the warehouse in time. Rayko had gone in the bedroom with the doctor, helping wherever she could. Nori's Tetsubo rested beside where he sat, and he watched the door with determined grimness. One unsettling thought kept ringing in his mind. One of them got away. What's more, that person saw Nori. And even more unsettling, he saw Flara. Rayko and Dr. Kausisti came out from the room. Slight bags were under Rayko's eyes, and she let out a heavy sigh as soon as she sat down beside Flara and Apisa. Nevertheless, she smiled. Dr. Kausisti sniffled as she stepped up to where they sat. The older doctor grinned as tears dripped from her chin.
Thank you. You saved my husband.
The doctor turned and grinned at Nori.
All of you, thank you, really. My husband is going to be okay. He's resting now.
Listen, I'm really happy that your husband is all right, but perhaps you should leave Jedi. Like, tonight.
What? Leave? You can't be serious.
Actually, I am. One of the thugs got away, and he's no doubt went back to his masters to relay what happened. Whereas the girls and I have the safety of the university and its guards, you and your husband don't.
I hate to agree with him, but he is right, darling. The Karaba clan is quite formidable, and there are a lot of them in the city.
Where are we supposed to go? My husband and I had built our lives here. People need us.
We realize that. But what good are you going to be if you are killed by these ruthless brigands? It might not have to be a permanent move, just for a little while until things settle.
Think of it as a spontaneous vacation.
But where are we supposed to go? My husband and I are from here. We don't know anyone else. Anywhere.
You could go to Tolfagus. My parents live there, you see, and they're in the same field as you. My mother is a doctor, and my father makes the medicine. If you visit them and tell them you're one of my friends, they'll be able to help you get settled and even connect you with clients while there.
Really? But Tolfagus is on the other side of the Empire. We don't have the coin to pay for passage like that.
Nori reached into his loot case and grabbed the large sack of gold that had been resting inside it, along with his instrument. He held it out to the doctor.
Oh, then here, please, take this as a gift. It's all of the money I've made from playing music while in Jedi. Been quite fortunate, and this could really help you with paying for a room tonight and then passage on a ship tomorrow. I think there are at least 240 pieces of gold.
Dr. Kausisti put her mouth to her hand, and she gaped at the bag of gold as if it were forbidden fruit. Flara, Apisa, and Rayko all looked at one another, wide expressions of their own.
I can't. That's way too much. I don't know that I could ever pay it back to you.
This isn't a loan, it's a gift. You two are very important to Flara, Apisa, and Rayko, and so thus, you are important to me.
For a long moment, the doctor just stared at the gold and then peeked up at Nori. Seconds passed by, and still she didn't reach for it. Flara got up from where she sat, and she moved over to Nori. She didn't look at him, but she took the gold that was in his grasp. With a gentle smile, she pushed the gold into Dr. Kausisti's hands.
The great Saito says, "It is through earnest living that we make the world around us more harmonious. Give with sincerity, and also be open to be given with sincerity. Let the world around you flourish." I have not known Mr. Nori long, but I've come to learn that he is brave and genuine in how he acts. But also, you have healed and helped so many people through your generosity. Isn't it about time that you received some kindness in return?
Dr. Calcisti locked gazes with Flara, and then she cried harder. She clutched the gold to her chest like it were a precious child, and then gave the Imperial Princess a couple of nods. Her eyes shifted, and then she peered up at Nori.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, how about we wait with you to collect your husband and some things, and then we can walk you over to an inn by the docks?
That would be lovely.
Nori, Apisa, Rayko, and Flara waited for the doctor and her husband to prepare, and they escorted them to one of the nicer, more reputable inns near the pier. When they walked to the inn, the girls moved with silence, and they didn't even talk to one another. They traded looks, though, and small gestures of the hand. Nori swallowed a little, but he kept his main attention on their surroundings. The sky was dark now, and the moon had started to rise above the horizon. It was only when they were on their way back to the university that the girls spoke again.
That was really nice of you, Mr. Nori. To give her your money, I mean.
Oh, thank you. I just figured she could use it more than I could. I'm covered by my previous gig.
Yes, well, it was quite endearing. You are very different than other Onistans. I am quite surprised.
Well, if anyone's surprised, it's me. I had no idea that you three were that,
Awesome?
Fabulous?
Academically advanced?
Well, not quite. But yes, to all those things, I'm sure. I had no idea you three were that dangerous. First of all, Miss Apisa, you were absolutely vicious. The way you tore those thugs apart with your claws, it was gruesome, and yet I couldn't stop marveling at it.
Thank you?
Yeah, remind me to never get in a fight with you. And Miss Rayko, you managed to trick the thugs long enough for the rest of us to take them out. Your illusions are just so incredible.
Yes, darling. I claim to be the best for a reason.
And Miss Flara, when you summoned that giant rock thing, I've never seen a real kami before, much less anything like that. All three of you are so impressive. I don't think the Empress really knows how talented you three are, or how well protected Miss Flara is with the two of you around.
Does this mean you shall be returning to Xianba in the very near future?
Well, no, that's not what this means at all. However, there is some good that came from this. I got a chance to gain a better understanding about what you all could do. It'll help me better protect and work with you when you do reckless endeavors in the future.
Yeah, knowing us, we'll still probably do crazy stuff, even if you are here. It also goes both ways too, big guy.
What do you mean?
Well, when you first arrived, I was afraid that you were going to be like any other Chutar. But you are kind-hearted and courageous, and you're willing to save other people who are in need.
You're also quite generous as well.
And most importantly, you're willing and open to give Flara her space and make the situation as easy for everyone as possible. We may not like that you still have to follow Flara around, but you at least keep a healthy distance away.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Nori.
You're welcome.
Nori and the others made it back to the university, and they each went to their rooms. Flara yawned widely before she went into her own room and then closed the door behind her. As soon as Nori closed his own door, he took off his clothes. His mind sparked with a single thought, and it kept repeating as he took out his Chutar armor. One of them got away, and he saw Flara. One of them got away, and he saw Flara. One of them got away, and he saw Flara. As soon as his Chutar armor was donned, he placed his regular clothes back on. Nori left his loot case in his room, and he gripped his Tetsubo tightly. With all the care he could muster, Nori opened the door and then gently closed it behind him. He crept down the stairwell and made it to the front entrance of the university. A pair of guards were at their stations, and they came to know Nori through his great music. They asked him where he was going so late at night, and Nori simply asked a single question.
Where can I find the Karaba main house or stronghold?
At first, the guards thought he was joking, but their misunderstanding of the situation soon faded when they gazed into his deadly serious eyes. One of the guards knew where it was. Nori moved off into the night. There was still work to be done. bitter, violent work.